All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jan Brito, and my business partner, Laura Quigley, is here, who is going to be speaking after me. Our licensed assistant, Jesse Belcher, is operating the laptop and the slides for us. We are Brito Associates of Compass, and we have a division of Brito Associates called Capital Senior Solutions. That is a division that specializes in seniors, and our sole purpose at Capital Senior Solutions is to educate and empower. So we do that through monthly seminars that we have here at Lakewood, as well as at other senior communities and villages throughout Montgomery County where we're asked to speak. There are always topics of interest to seniors, such as today's, communicating with adult children. I assume everyone here has a child. Maybe they're adults by now. Maybe some of you are even grandparents by now. Is communication always super easy? Probably not. And when it comes to talking about things as you grow older and aging topics, it becomes even a little more challenging. So just to tell you briefly what qualifies Laura and I to speak to all these topics related to seniors. We found an institute in Oklahoma called the Seniors Real Estate Institute, and we took a very, very rigorous year-long course there and walked away with a certification called Certified Senior Housing Professional. It was extremely involved, lots of research on the psychology of aging. We also had to hold focus groups. We had to visit various types of senior communities and document those tours. And we had to sit for a review board interview before getting the designation. So in a lot of industries, you can take a class and you're the expert. But in this one, we actually had to be interviewed because they wanted to make sure we had a heart for serving seniors and we weren't just in it for the commission check. Because let's face it, we are realtors. Ultimately, we will get listings from the work that we do, but our goal is to educate and empower, like I said. We also went on to get licensed as certified senior downsizing coaches because this is such an emotional experience for people. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two panelists, Erik Feig and Jen Gruber. And I'm going to read their introduction here. My mic, I have to stand right in front of it. Okay, Jen Gruber received her certification through the nationally renowned coaching school, Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. She completed training as a core transitions dynamic specialist and as an energy leadership index master practitioner, enabling her to administer the ELI assessment. She's recognized as an associate certified coach by the International Coaching Federation. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology and Communication Arts, a double major, from James Madison University. And Erik Feig founded Feig Mediation Group, a parent and family-focused mediation firm in Bethesda, to help parents, families, and businesses create paths to more positive outcomes when important issues and decisions are on the line and communication can be most difficult. He is a mediator, accomplished attorney, and parent of 3 amazing children. So I would like to call Laura up. There she is. To take over the program from here. And I hope you all enjoy. We'll certainly have lots of time for questions as we go along. Thank you.
Can I take this off? Yeah. Do you guys mind if I take this off? Okay. I do much better walking and talking. Sorry, everyone. So before we get started about communication, I think there's a couple things we need to talk about. And that is, first, how does our family communicate and make decisions together? Then also, what are some of those challenging topics that we maybe should be thinking about? So I'm going to walk through those things, and then I'm going to hand it over to our experts to help you figure out how to do that. Does that make sense? So in families, Jan and I in our business, yes, it's real estate. We're out there helping people figure out where to move, how to move, what does that look like? But we often come across the family dynamic. Sometimes the decision maker is independent, they're doing it on their own. Sometimes there's family involvement. So we've kind of categorized the families. And you'll notice we don't usually hand out the whole presentation, but we thought today would be important because you can take a lot of notes on this. And I'm thinking as I go through this, you might identify your family dynamic. And so that when the experts are speaking, you might have questions about how do you handle this dynamic. So the first dynamic is the uninvolved. This is just making your decision. You may or may not have family, but you're making your decisions. The second is the supportive, available if needed. That's adult children who, if asked to come sit at the table, will come sit at the table and help. But they're there, they're supporting their parents' decisions, but they're not involved. They're not making those decisions for their parents. And then we have the supportive, actively involved. They are having a seat at the table. The family wants to be together to make these decisions. They want their kids hearing everything that they're hearing. They want their advice, they want their counsel, but they're still making their own decisions. They're just taking this advice from their family. Is everybody hearing me okay? Okay, good. Okay, then we have the controlling unavailable. And you may say to yourself, those two words don't go together, okay? How can you be controlling and not there? You'd be surprised how often we see this. This is the adult child or family member who lives remotely, across the city, across the country, but they perceive themselves as the decision maker, and they put a lot of pressure on the parents or the family member trying to decide. So they may not be sitting at the table, but we know that that child or family member will be on the phone telling them what to do. And obviously that can be very challenging for everyone. Then we have the controlling and actively involved. I will raise my hand because this is me. I did this before I learned how bad this was. But as a daughter, I had actually 6 adult parents to deal with. And so anytime something happened, I swooped in, took control, told them what to do. I did it from love. I did it from caring. I did it because I thought I knew better. But I didn't recognize that I didn't give them the grace and the peace to make their own decisions as the accomplished adults that they were. So we do see this a lot, and it kind of tends to be daughters. Sorry, the daughters out there. Then we have the proxy decision maker by design. That is when the plan has been put in place. When the parent has said, okay, if this happens, then this person makes the decisions. It might be a power of attorney, it might be a healthcare proxy, but it's in place. And then we have the proxy decision makers by default. A plan was not put in place, a crisis happens, and that family member that maybe you didn't want making your decisions is now taking control. And it's because they have to. They may not want to, but no plan was put into place. So, and did everybody look at that and kind of figure out where they might fit? Okay, so now let's talk about communications. And I'm gonna be brief on this because I am not the expert on communications, but this slide, go back, Tessie, please. This slide talks about communications. And I think a lot of us think like, I send my message, just like now, I'm telling you this, and you're listening, and you're absorbing all of my intent and everything I'm meaning to teach you today. And then maybe you're giving me some feedback. But the reality is, that's not the case. You know, I'm coming at it, I'm communicating a message that I, quote, think you need to hear. But I'm coming at it with my own emotions and my own background, and you're hearing it with whatever filters you might have. So it's not always a clear message. You had a point, right?
Can you all hear me? Yeah, I love the picture that's on the bottom of the screen here, the sender, the receiver, the message, and the feedback. When I talk about communication sometimes, and this is just another way to think about it, there's 3 pieces. This is what you, can you hear me now? There's 3 pieces. One is what you're saying, one is what you're hearing, the other is what you mean. And the reality is, you can lose each other on any of those 3 steps, or all of them. And again, with the best of intentions, but if you're not checking in with each other, if you're not taking the steps to make sure that all 3 of those align, it's very easy to find yourself in a conversation with everybody going in different directions.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is truths about communication. And I think, Jen, you had some comments you wanted to make about this.
Yeah. Can I come?
Sure, come on.
Great. Okay, so can you hear me? as the slide shows us, verbal communication is one type of communication. And when we think about verbal communication, generally what comes to mind is the words that we're saying. We think that's how we're communicating. But in actuality, that accounts for only 7% of what people hear. As Erik was just saying, what we hear, what's heard is sometimes different than what we're saying or what we're intending. The bulk of the communication comes from how you sound, 38%, and then 55% of the impact comes from how you appear. So to kind of illustrate that, I'm going to give you an example. And Erik, can you stand up for a second? I know I'm catching him off guard, but I'm pretty sure he won't mind. And come over like a little bit closer. And so to illustrate this, I'm going to give an example where, let's say Erik is my brother, and I'm telling him that Mom just told me he's going to Florida for Thanksgiving. Those are the words. He's going to be in Florida for Thanksgiving. Okay, so Erik, Mom says you're going to be in Florida for Thanksgiving. Okay, that's example one. What came across in that? Any?
Anger, a bit of anger.
Some anger, yeah. Some surprise, right?
Frustration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Some negativity, definitely.
Frustration.
Frustration. Yeah. Now, how about this? So, Erik, Mom tells me you're going to Florida for Thanksgiving. Okay. What's different about that?
Excitement, happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. How about Erik? So, Mom tells me you're going to Florida for Thanksgiving? Anything different about that? Some judgment, some disappointment, yeah. Let's see, what about, what about this one? Like, so Erik, Mom told me that you're going to Florida for Thanksgiving. It's a little bit different emphasis there. Mom told me, you didn't tell me yourself. I had to hear it from Mom, so that's a little bit different. Then what about this one? So Erik, like, Mom told me you're going to Florida for Thanksgiving.
Curious.
A little curious, yeah.
Trust.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then what about if I look at him and say, so Erik, Mom says you're going to Florida for Thanksgiving. How do you feel about that one, Erik?
The last one to me sounded the most neutral. What do you all think?
And if I'm speaking to you neutrally like that, what might you be thinking about what the meaning behind my words is?
Well, the meaning, and there's two pieces to me. One is it's an invitation to a conversation. I can respond without feeling pressure, positive or negative. And I also experience it as inviting me to just talk about what going to Florida for Thanksgiving would be.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can sit down if you'd like to. Thank you for your help. So when we look at what goes into, yes.
I thought that last one sounded very matter of fact and like you really don't care, and I wouldn't engage in a conversation. So I guess it depends if you come from like a Spanish or an Italian family or what kind of family you come from and what kind of emotions you're used to. But to me, that sounded empty.
Which is such a great point because what Erik perceived was totally different than what you perceived. So we're all in the same room, you all heard the same thing, but the message that you're receiving and how inviting you see that as a conversation opener is very different. So, yes.
What you're demonstrating is that just about every one of your iterations
cried out for more explanation. It's a statement, but it's not a conversation. It's not clarification.
Right, right. And I think the response, how do you feel about the type of response? What difference might there be in the type of response that Erik would have to those various?
Feel that he's defensive. He might want to just clarify something, might agree, yes, I am, or no, why are you worried about it, or something like that.
Exactly. So there were some where he could easily be very defensive and feel attacked and really feel blamed and defensive, and other examples where he might feel like, I'm really excited to have this conversation and talk about my trip to Florida. So same words, totally different interpretations, and as we talked about, different assumptions could be made based on the way those different statements were voiced. So when we think about the 38% coming from how you sound, what's kind of tied up in that is how fast or slow I'm speaking, which word I'm emphasizing, whether I'm stating something kind of as a statement or a question. Those things all kind of get wrapped into, how you sound. And then how you appear, that's kind of, in some examples I was making eye contact with Erik, in some I wasn't, some I was smiling, some I was, scowling or had more of an unpleasant look on my face. Gestures, hand movements, if I'm like waving my arms or pointing at him, that all impacts the way the other person is going to perceive what we're communicating to them. So those words, coming back to the main point, really do account for a small portion of the communication, and being aware of how we're communicating with our tone of voice and with our gestures can really help us to communicate more effectively once we're aware of that. So I'll turn it back over to Laura for a minute.
Can I add one more element to that, which is also, and I think you both were touching on it a little bit, which is your history with each other. That also matters. We're talking here in this example, this was a sibling relationship. So depending on how we've interacted in the past and what that's looked like, some of those interactions may have sounded aggressive. It might have been, here we go again, this is the beginning of another battle. It might have been heard, even though it might sound one way to an outsider, that might have been great enthusiasm, right? And it's hard to know, but that relationship also plays into the dynamic of how we're going to interact with each other.
Thank you, guys. So I'm going to add on to this just a little bit about this slide, because I want you to think about your appearance, right? So if only 7% is coming from your words, right, a lot of it's coming from your physicality, your appearance. So think of this example. Spouses, and one takes a tumble, ends up in the hospital. Okay, it's minor, they're going to go to rehab. So the parents are there. Maybe it was dad's in the hospital bed, and the child comes in. What do they see? They see dad in a hospital gown, maybe with IVs, maybe with a bruise. So what do they think? He's helpless. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Something's going to happen here. They need me. Whereas mom and dad have this figured out, right? They know which rehab they're going to. This is not a big deal. They have it together, but the appearance is throwing it off. So when you want to communicate something important to your family, whether it be your children or your adult parents, your appearance matters. And so what's the best way to do that? In person, right? In person, be confident. Think about the message. They're going to give you the tips and tricks, but think about the message you want to send. So now let's talk about the topics, okay? So this is kind of a higher level topic, not the details of what you have to talk about, but it's going to happen, right? We're all aging. It's inevitable. And conversations are going to need to be had with our loved ones on what we want that to look like, how we want that to be. At what point do we want some help? Do we want some transfer of day-to-day responsibilities? And then what are the ground rules around that? Like, what is the triggering event that says, okay, you should take this over for me? Or, okay, I'm ready to do this now. So setting the boundaries around that. Think of it as a series of what-if conversations. What if this? Then we're going to do this, and make it clear and have that communication so that the person you're talking to really understands your intent. You can go to the next one, Jess. So these are the more concrete topics that we come across frequently. Obviously, financing and money management. Your current, your future living arrangements. Do you want to age in place? Do you want to age in place to a certain period of time? And then when this happens, I want to move. Do I want to not do this and just get to a community now and then not have to worry about it? Communication. This is a hot one. Driving and transportation arrangements. Who's going to tell mom she can't drive anymore? Who's going to take away the keys? I have 2 stories on this. One, my neighbor across the street, his nephew would come visit every 2 to 3 weeks, and he would take his uncle's car keys, and he would undo the battery. Okay? That was their way. His car would be at the corner stop sign, and AAA would be in the driveway. Because Uncle figured that out, and he had a plan, and he was driving again, and he should not have been driving. But they couldn't communicate about this. And then the other one, just a little shocking for me, is I have a 30-year-old son who recently told me that he thinks his dad and I should move to downtown Bethesda so we can walk to the metro and not drive anymore. Now that's a big disconnect, right? And it's happening in my own family. But he's coming from a place of love and care. But it was a little disconcerting, right, to hear that. So also getting and managing medical, personal care, and then end-of-life arrangements. These are all challenging, difficult topics. So thinking about what your family looks like and what some of these topics are, I'll move on. Let's talk about the truths. Okay, guess what? Your adult children, just like mine, are having conversations about us. They're talking about you. And how do we know that? Because they call Jan and I, and they say things like, Mom is moving to assisted living. Come on over, sell her house. Jan and I get there, and within 10 minutes, we know Mom is not moving, okay? She's not moving. Kids think she's moving. She's not moving. And if they make her move, it is gonna be really hard on everyone. So at that point, that's where the downsizing coaching comes in, and we take that real estate hat off and try to help this family figure this out. The adult children of aging parents also have conflicting roles as their caregivers. Adult children want to do the right thing for their parents. Who doesn't? We want to do right by our parents. We want them to be in a safe environment. We want to care for them. But we also have busy, active lives. We may have children. We may have intense jobs. We may have other stresses in our lives. So sometimes those 2 things really don't go hand in hand and cause a lot of conflict. We often see this when an adult child says, yeah, Mom and Dad are moving to be near us because it's good for them. Is it good for them? Do Mom and Dad want to do that? Or is it good for you? So that can also be a very challenging conversation in families. None of us want to feel like someone is controlling our decisions. Aging, creating conflicts for us as individuals. Like I said, we want to be independent, all right? We want to be in control of our decision making, but we all realize as we get older, we're going to need some level of help. And what does that look like? And that can cause a conflict within an individual. So if you're conflicted, how are you communicating that to the people that are going to surround you and help you as you age? And then lastly, effective communication is a shared responsibility. You guys have already touched upon that. It's not just me sending out the message that I want you to hear and absorb. It's you hearing it the way I'm intending it. And if you're not understanding, communicating back so that there can be clarity on that. So I think, where am I? I'm done. I'm handing it over to my experts now. Jen is going to give you the top 10 tips from Jen on how to communicate. Here we go.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, so these are some tips that could be helpful in any situation, not just dealing with communications between parents and children. It could be in any conversation you have. The first thing that it's great to be really clear on is what's your goal in this conversation. So kind of for purposes of going through these 10 tips, I'm going to present a scenario where I am going to tell my kids that I'm thinking about leaving in January for a 6-month around the world cruise. And I'm going to tell my kids that's what I'm thinking about doing. So the first thing I want to be really clear on with myself is, okay, I'm going to have this conversation with them. What's my goal in this conversation? Have I already decided that I'm going on this cruise regardless of what they say? Or do I feel like I need some buy-in from them? Do I want their opinions? Do I just want them to understand what I'm doing and feel good about it? Am I looking for advice or suggestions? Do I want to know whether they think it's a good idea or a bad idea? And is that going to impact my decision? And if that's the case, do I need to make a decision by the end of this conversation? Is my goal to have that decision by the time we're done talking? Or am I just kind of planting some seeds? So being clear on what my goal is with the conversation and where I want to be at the end of the conversation is super important, because that's the goal that I'm looking for. That's how I'm going to know if the conversation has been successful or not, if I'm accomplishing what I want to. Second tip, choose a time and place that are conducive to having a productive conversation. Now, Laura just mentioned talking in person being a lot more effective when you're having, especially a serious conversation, than trying to do it over the phone or FaceTime or Zoom. A lot of times people think like, oh, the holidays are perfect. Everybody's going to be together for Thanksgiving. I'm going to be with mom and dad. All my siblings are going to be here. This is the time that we need to sit down and have this conversation because we're all together in one room. This is when we're going to do it. So let's say it's Thanksgiving. Dinner's at 4, so at 2:30, I'm like, okay, we've got about an hour. Let me grab everybody, get everybody together, sit everybody down, and now I'm going to tell you, okay, I've got this plan. I'm planning to leave in January for a 6-month around the world cruise. How might my family react to that, given that the timing of the conversation? If you were cooking Thanksgiving dinner and you've just basted the turkey and pulled it out of the oven and the potatoes are on the stove, and someone in your family said to you, okay, let's just take a half an hour and sit down and have this serious conversation. How does the timing feel? Same thing after dinner. Okay, everybody's eaten, everybody's happy now. Let's have this talk. Seriously, like a lot of people are exhausted by the end of the day. Some families, everyone's been drinking wine. That's not necessarily the best time to have this conversation. So a lot of times people think, the time that everyone is automatically, already going to be together is the best time, and it's just not always the best time. So keeping that in mind, whether the alternative is having a conversation without everyone present or over the phone or arranging to get together at another time. Just really thinking about the fact that just because everyone is going to be together in the same place doesn't necessarily make it the best time and place to have the conversation. You first and then you.
General, at least for me, but I don't think people like to be caught off guard. I mean, if you're going to somebody's home, your cousins, your brothers, your mothers, whoever, for Thanksgiving, you're thinking about eating, catching up with family, watching football, eating more, that sort of thing. You're not thinking about your parents' next step. And I think people like to be prepared so that if it's going to be a Thanksgiving because everybody's going to be together, a heads up a day or two before to say, I'd like to spend 15 minutes talking about some of my future plans is probably a good idea. Or if it's unrelated to the holidays and saying next Tuesday, I'd like to get everybody together and we can meet at Starbucks or whatever, because I want to talk about some things I have on my mind about my plans, so that people can focus. You don't have to necessarily give out an agenda, but so they can come with a point of reference, not football games and eating a lot of fattening desserts.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. And when people are caught off guard, especially when it's about, when it's to talk about something that is serious and potentially uncomfortable, giving them preparation, giving that heads up, making that plan, saying, I've got something I'd like to talk about. When can we arrange to do that is a great idea. Now, some people feel like, oh, well, I don't want to say that because then they'll worry. Well, they may, but given, at least they're aware. Yes, exactly, yes.
Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't understand why an adult sharing an extended vacation is an off-putting discussion. That doesn't, like, if I'm sharing with my family, to me, that is catching up. Okay, yeah, we've planned a long vacation. We're going to cruise for 6 months. We are so excited. Like, to me, how is that a bad, I mean, we're talking about adults that have made this decision and they're sharing it with their family? How is that an off-putting conversation?
If they're seniors and maybe health issues or mobility issues or financial issues, so
Their kids
it's
are worried
going to come
about
out.
Oh, so we're
politically
talking about
incorrect.
seniors that
Yes.
don't have a capacity to make decisions.
Well, seniors in general. I'll let Jen answer.
I mean, I work with a lot of seniors, wealthy seniors, and that I don't understand.
Okay, so if we think back to one of Laura's earlier slides about the controlling family members, there could be the controlling family members who are going to jump in and think, okay, why would you go away for 6 months? That you've got health issues, you can't afford it. That's a ridiculous decision.
There's a lot of scene setting issues here. We're not
Okay, maybe I'm just
told-
thinking about my particular
We're not
clients.
told all of the background material.
Okay.
Yeah, and it could be a different kind. That's an example of a conversation. It could be.
But then we're talking about a senior that isn't in the right state of mind to make decisions.
We're talking about anyone who could bring something up that their family may react in different ways to.
I have a good example. Laura's 30-year-old son telling her she shouldn't be driving anymore. Who is he to tell her that? There could be someone who thinks their 70-year-old parents shouldn't be going away for 6 months by themselves,
It goes back to that whole family dynamic and decision-making process, how families work together. But also, like, everyone has a different idea of what is safe for their parents, what their parents could afford. What if I'm a newlywed or whatever, and what, you're going away for 6 months and we're having a baby, or like, it just anticipating how they might feel about that, and oftentimes, like, yeah, I've got this 30-year-old who thinks he's got to care for me. So I need to respect that, but manage him to the point where he realizes that's not necessary, right?
I've seen your driving.
Right. Okay. So the next 3 tips kind of all go hand in hand. Approaching conversations with curiosity, letting go of assumptions, and asking why. So I could go into this conversation thinking like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to tell me I shouldn't go because I can't afford to go on this trip. Or I could go into it thinking like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to be so excited for me. Or I could go into it thinking like, okay, I'm sharing this information and let's see if they have questions, and I really don't know how they're going to react. So let's go into it kind of neutrally and see where the conversation goes. Now, if I'm assuming that I'm going to be met with resistance, I might go into the conversation like, listen, I know you may think this isn't a good idea, but it's something I really want to do. And then already you're setting the stage for, you're putting them, they're prepared for a fight. Or going into it going like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to share this with you. I've got this trip coming up. That sets a totally different stage than the other tone did. And then asking why. So if I tell my kids, like, okay, I'm leaving in January for a 6-month cruise around the world, and if they respond immediately with, okay, Mom, that's ridiculous, I could jump to the conclusion or assume that they think it's ridiculous because I can't afford it. And at that point, I might say, okay, I know you think it's ridiculous, but it's my money. I've worked hard, and I've decided this is what I want to do, and this is my decision. Whereas if I ask them, what's ridiculous about it? The answer might have nothing to do with money. It might be, well, Mom, like, I don't know, you've just never talked about traveling before. You've never been interested in traveling. I've never heard you mention wanting to go on a cruise. It just seems like it's totally out of the blue. At that point, they're saying it's ridiculous because it seems like it's out of the blue, which is totally different than being ridiculous because of financial reasons. So the next thing that is really helpful is to let them know that you've heard them by repeating back the words that they're using. And so saying, like, you know what, I can see how that might seem ridiculous to you, and I realize that I haven't talked about traveling in the past. So yeah, it probably does sound like it's coming from out of the blue. But I talked to a neighbor last year who did this trip, and she just loved having someone else cook all her meals, and she didn't have to clean, and someone did her laundry for her, and she got to see other parts of the world, and it was amazing. And so that really sets the tone for a different conversation. And then paying attention to hints and clues. If what my daughter is saying is, this is ridiculous, you've never talked about traveling, but then as we're talking, she says, well, I just don't know why you need to do it this winter. We have, we've got like our baby's being born in March. Then, okay, well, maybe it's not about her thinking it's ridiculous. It's about her wanting you to be here when the baby's born. And then you can respond to that, well, that actually, I am really sad that I won't be here when the baby's born. I've been thinking about that, and I'll be back by the time he's 3 months old, and I'm so excited to be able to help you out then and tell you all about my trip. And then as you're talking, noticing any reactions that you're having, and if you're really feeling triggered and feel like, oh my gosh, my daughter's being so selfish. Well, I can't believe I'm excited about this trip, and all she can think about is herself and her baby. Taking a deep breath and reminding yourself, okay, this doesn't make me a bad mom. It doesn't make me selfish to want to take this trip. And then kind of thinking, okay, is this the right time to continue this conversation, or should we maybe take a break now? And is this the time for me to say, you know what, I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to share this with you. Let's think it over a little bit. Let's revisit the conversation in a week or whenever. And then always ending the conversation by thanking the other person for listening and letting them know that, you know what, I really do care about you and love you. And the reason I'm telling you about my plans is because, I do want you to be supportive of the choices that I'm making. That's important to me. And I appreciate, the fact that I can be open with you and talk to you, and I love you, and ending with, just ending on that positive note is really important. Now, as far as the feedback that we might get from the other person, and we'll use a different example for this. So let's say I'm telling my kids, okay, I want you to know that I have updated my will. My assets are going to be divided equally among the three of you. And I am appointing Erik as the executor of my estate. Okay, very kind of straightforward. That's what I've done. I've conveyed that to them kind of as neutrally as I can. Now, the feedback I might get from my kids, the verbal and nonverbal responses. We talked about that earlier. So they might say like, okay, that's fine. But if they say, okay, that's fine, it could be like, okay, that's fine. Or it could be like, okay, that's fine. So when we think about the verbal and nonverbal responses, we're thinking in a conversation not only about how we're coming across nonverbally, but also we can read the nonverbal clues in the people around us. And that will help us to get an idea of whether they're really fine with this or whether they're just saying they're fine with it. Questions and clarification, one of the kids may say, can you explain why you made that decision? And again, it could be like, can you explain like why you picked Erik? Or it could be like, oh, can you explain that? Avoidance, your kids may say nothing. One of my kids may say, okay, done. Don't want to talk about this. This is uncomfortable. Don't want to talk about your will, your estate, and move on. Now, if that happens, going back to what Laura said earlier, there's a decent chance that your kids may be talking about you behind your back. Oh my gosh, why did mom pick Erik? They may not want to talk to me about it, but maybe questioning that. That would fall under the category of avoidance. Next steps, action items. Those could be initiated either by me or my kids. It could be either my kids saying like, okay, that's great. What do you need me to do? How can we support you in this? Or I could say, I need you to X, Y, and Z. Additional conversations, same thing, could be initiated by me or my kids. One of the kids could say, this is kind of a lot. I really don't like talking about this. Can you just give me some time to process and maybe we can come back and talk about it later? Or I might say the same thing. I know this is a lot. It's a heavy topic. Let me know if you have any questions later. Giving them the opportunity to follow up with questions if they need to. And then, was the message received and understood? So this is a tricky one because a lot of times we don't know for sure. I'll share a story with you about my Aunt Betty and Uncle Al. And probably about 30 years ago, they were visiting us from North Carolina for New Year's. And we're sitting around the table, everyone's chatting. And my Uncle Al, my mom's little brother, told us, he's like, oh, I was in big trouble on Christmas. And really, why is that? And I said, well, Betty and I talked before Christmas, and she said, we've had a lot of expenses this year. We've had a big year. How about if we don't exchange Christmas presents this year? And he said, great. Sounds like a good plan. No Christmas presents this year. Excellent. Understood. Message received. Understood. We're in great shape. Christmas morning comes. They go downstairs. He looks under the tree, and there's a stack of presents for him and a stocking full of gifts. And Aunt Betty is all excited. Let me sit down. I'll bring you your stocking. And he's a little confused, but starts opening presents. And then he's thanking her, looking at her, and she's looking confused. And finally he says, are you okay? And she says, well, where are my presents? And he says, well, we agreed that we weren't going to exchange presents this year. And she said, well, I meant we weren't going to exchange big presents. I didn't mean any presents. And she's like, you mean you didn't get me anything? And his response was, we said we weren't going to give each other anything. So same words, they were in the same conversation, they each walked away from it with a very different understanding. Now 30 years later, they're still happily married, so they were able to move past that and resolve it. But I think it's just a pretty fitting example of how even when you think you're on the same page, you can walk away with different understandings of the same conversation. So in order to avoid that, it can be helpful to just kind of close with something like, listen, this is really important to me, and I want to make sure we're on the same page. So just to clarify, this is what this means. Erik is the executor of the estate. That means he's the one who's responsible for speaking directly with the attorney. You know, do you have any questions about this? Because this is you know, this is important. Or so let me just make sure that you heard what I said. What's your takeaway from this conversation? Just to make sure that everyone's on the same page at the end of the conversation. And with that, I think, are there questions before I turn things over to Erik at this point? All right, then Erik, I'll turn things over to you.
You know, as I'm thinking about some of what we were talking about here, I think it highlights the issue. It really boils down to it's how we're experiencing each other, how we're experiencing the world, and how we're communicating with each other. Taking Jen's example just as a starting point, I heard questions. Why is it an issue? Of course it's going to be an issue, right? How could having this conversation coming into Thanksgiving not be an issue? All of those are real responses. They're all valid responses. They speak to the way that we communicate with each other, the way we hear each other, or sometimes don't hear each other very well, or go back to what we were saying before. We might be hearing different messages, right? What might be exciting to me might be anxiety producing to somebody else. I'm taking that trip. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this work? Who's going to take care of this? How are we going to? That might be one person's reaction. The other might be, great, we'll see you in 6 months. Let us know how it goes, right? Maybe we will send pictures along the way. Send us movies, send us photos. And that's it. They're entirely different ways that we're experiencing it. And I think part of the challenge when we're talking to each other is, are we doing it in a way that we can hear? Right? We know what our agenda is when we go into what might be a difficult conversation. But is our agenda going to line up with your agenda or your agenda when you're hearing this? Are we on the same page even for a starting point? And that's some of what leads to what we're calling the roadblocks. And these are just examples. These aren't in any particular order of importance, but different communication styles, conflict styles. Are you, as Jen was saying, are you conflict avoidant? You gather a family together, let's say it's 7 people. You might have 7 different ways that you're experiencing the world, that you address conflict. One might be avoidant. One might be a conflict creator. Right? Any issue becomes an opportunity within, and we have family dynamics in there, but it might be an opportunity to get another dig in because we've been fighting about something for the last 10 years and it's still unresolved. Right? And all of this can play in conflict, different communication styles. Put an extrovert together with a group of introverts. What do you have? You have a lot of people listening. Right? But is it a conversation? Are you somebody that says, when you ask, okay, do you have questions? And the answer is always no. But they clearly have issues, concerns, questions, things that they want to talk about, but they don't feel welcome within the group. This plays into those family dynamics. You know each other a long time. You know how and what the triggers are. You know what the buttons are. And also, you know that sometimes you're not going to get your concerns, hopes, goals into the room because everybody else is moving along faster than you. Or the decisions are made, you might feel, before you even have a chance to get them on the table, get them into the space. So this all goes into how we're communicating, whether our communication is effective. Can we see another perspective? I don't understand why this is important to you. I don't understand why this is an issue. Anybody ever hear that in a family conversation? Right? Why is this such a big, why don't you just say yes? Right? This should be easy. Why are we having this conversation at all? Right? These are all ways that we lose each other. What does that do to dialogue? Right? Why are we having this conversation isn't exactly an invitation to respond with anything other than, okay, let's move on. Right? Doesn't mean the issue's resolved. Doesn't mean that the concerns being addressed. It means that maybe get put off till later. Those unresolved issues are kind of like weeds. If you don't take care of them, they grow. And eventually they start to take over other issues, and they work their way in. So when it comes to disagreements, I find that how we disagree can be just as important as how and what we're talking about. Later on, you're not necessarily going to remember all the details of what you're talking about. You're going to remember how you addressed it. Was it a fight? Did we come together? Did we work as a team? All of that plays into it. Being able to take those, and I'll just, the last one I'll just say is, well, being able to take those, just our own history also plays into it. Very much so. Again, what life stage I might be at, or my family might be at, if we have, let's say again, talking about adult children. They may be at very different places in their lives. They may be dealing with different issues. They might have different situations, whether we're talking about within their family, whether we're talking about their relationships within the larger family, maybe it's capital F, family, the whole family. All of that is going to play into our ability to communicate effectively. Thank you. Is this better? How's that? Thank you. I'm sorry about that. So we have a worksheet that we have put out on the table. And this is to help. This is kind of putting together everything we're talking about. And it's something that is intended to be an assist for both you and the people you're talking with. And it's a way to prepare. So what do we start with? It starts with, what are we talking about? Simple question, right? You fill in an answer. What are we going to talk about? It's my view of what we're going to talk about. It's also an opportunity that when you get in the room to check in with other people, that when I say I'd like to talk about the vacation, or I'd like to talk about what my estate plans are, or what care plans might look like, that might have one meaning to me. It might have an entirely different meaning to you, or to you, or to you, when we're talking about all of that. So it's an opportunity not only to get clarity of what I'm hoping to have a conversation about, but it's an opportunity as well to check in with each other by asking the same question of the others in the room. And it works the same way with all of the other questions on this worksheet. What are our goals? What do we want to accomplish? If it's an issue that we're trying to solve, what do we want our conversation to help make better at the end? What types of outcomes do we want? Often, I find that I do this, I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else, is I go in, I've already thought through the conversation I'm going to have 10, 15, okay, beyond this, 50 times before I actually have it. By the time I get in the room with family or whomever it might be, my conversation is already old to me. I'm ready to move on. I know the answers because I've thought of them already. And I know what you're going to say or what you're going to say and what my answers to all of your concerns are going to be. I see some smiles. What's the problem with that? Reality. We're going to get in the room and we're going to have a real conversation, not necessarily the one I had in my head. And I'm going to need to check in each step of the way, or I should be checking in each step of the way to make sure we are all going along together in this. We may have differences of opinions, we may have different ideas. How do we bring all of that in? And that goes through, what are our goals? What do we want to accomplish? The word fairness, for instance, take the executor idea. Fairness means different things to different people, right? And if we're going to use that word, Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. What are our expectations? Who needs to take part in the conversation? This is another one that a little bit of planning can go a long ways. If you want to have a conversation that involves everyone, make sure everyone is there. And then it's not, if you need 4 people, if 3 of you are there and you're just reporting to the fourth person may have a lot of ideas that would have been helpful. So it's how do we engage each other? How do we make sure it's not just grabbing somebody right before Thanksgiving, an hour before while we're still cooking and saying, hey, I want to have a 15-minute conversation that suddenly is going to be the Thanksgiving dinner conversation, or is going to be anxiety producing because it's going to be Friday and now we're thinking about what it might look like during Thanksgiving dinner and afterwards. But it's making sure that it's not just taking advantage of the convenience of having people together, but saying, you know what, let's do it, as Ben was saying, in a way where we're being thoughtful, we're being intentional. We can sit down at a time, we can focus, be in a place that lends itself to having a conversation, and then handling it in a way where people are able to communicate with each other. And then I'll say the last one on there, which is, again, this is part of what you do once you're in the conversation, but also for planning, is to get some ideas about if you're going to have a solution that works for everyone, not just you. This is where the perspective taking comes in as well, and being able to talk about hopes, concerns, ideas. A solution that works for everyone gets buy-in from everyone, ideally. What would that look like? What are some options? Sometimes we talk about, problem solving as being, assembling like a puzzle. Taking the puzzle pieces, you put them all together, all the factors, and they fit together neatly. I tend to think a little more dynamically like that. Puzzles get assembled one way. All the pieces fit together one way. There's one answer. And very often we'll come into a conversation about problem solving saying, I know the answer. My way, your way, their way. One of them's going to win and someone's going to say, you know what, I didn't win that one. I got 3 kids. I think about Lego pieces. We're a Lego family. We have Lego pieces all over the house. But the beauty of Lego is that they could be assembled lots and lots of different ways. And part of the problem solving is, if we're going to make things work for everyone, what might some of our options be? And when we get together, what might be some ideas that we didn't think of on our own? When we're hearing some other options. Different options, you could look at them together and say, okay, let's look at what might work best for us, for this situation. Here are some ways to, let me stop here for a moment. Any questions at this point? Thoughts, concerns? Okay, we can keep going. Some invitations, some ways to start what might be a difficult conversation. These are just some examples. Building off of what we're doing here, I went to this seminar the other day. I want to share with you some of what I learned. When might be some time we can get together? That idea again, doing some planning. You're giving a flag that I want to talk about it, what I want to talk about, and that this is a conversation that might take some focus. We're making estate plans. We'd like to share with you what we're thinking. Sharing is an important word in that one. I'm not telling you what we're doing. We'd like to share. And then again, is that an invitation to then having a conversation? When would be a good time for us to schedule time to talk? Let's put it on the calendar. I have some things that are important to me that I want to run by you. Again, that's something that leads to a conversation. I'm not just reporting. Here's a couple more. We might be entering some uncharted territory. We have more and more birthdays. I put some thoughts down, and I'd like to talk with you about them. My goal, my hope is to make life easier on both you and me. Being able to see how this would work for everyone. So I've written down some things that I feel are important. Your feedback, I'm working on the emphasis. Your feedback, your questions are welcome. These are all ways that invites a dialogue, not just a presentation. And I think that's some of where we struggle is we make presentations to each other instead of having conversations with each other. I see a question?
If you're having this conversation.
I see a question.
Question, if you're having this conversation and you're saying, I want to set up a time to talk with you, there's some important things I want to share. What's your suggestion for dealing with a child that will say, well, let's talk about it right now, it's so important?
So the question is, how would we respond for the child who says, let's talk about it right now? And that might be someone who gets anxious when they hear, I have something important that I want to hear. There's nothing wrong with giving a heads up or saying, these are the types of things, or these are some of the issues. But I want to make sure we're all doing this when we can focus. And I don't want to do this piecemeal. I want to make sure we're all together on this. We have the conversation together, so then these are just some thoughts. This is where my thoughts are going. I would like to do this when we could all hear each other's questions and address them together instead of my answering yours and then my answering theirs and my answering theirs. I'd rather we do this as a group, as a family.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. And I guess, Jan, if your question, if it were just one person who are like, it's just me and you having this conversation, why do we have to schedule a time? Just tell me what you want to tell me right now. I think that would indicate that maybe there's some fear or anxiety. And so to respond with some reassurance and be like, look, everything's fine. I don't want you to worry. I just want to take some time that neither of us are distracted. I'm not prepared right now. I want to sit down when I can really focus, and I'd like to set some time aside to do that. So.
I want to just chime in here and say, I wish I had come to this seminar like 2 months ago. Because I can give you an example of a really bad decision on my husband and my part. We had my son and his new wife in the car driving home from a family wedding, and we were like, we never see them, so let's tell them our estate plan. Didn't go really well. But my husband and I were in tune because we were like, we've got them, captive audience, they're in the back seat, we're just gonna tell them what we're doing. I got to backpedal a little bit on that now after today and try to set the stage for better communication down the road.
Always taking the car keys away from you.
Yeah, car keys away from you. But I will say something interesting that came up in that conversation is I thought I was giving my son a gift and told him he was not my healthcare proxy. My cousin would do that. And I was giving him this gift. And his reaction was, that's my responsibility. And he was hurt. So open dialogue, conversation, what do you think? I'm thinking of this would have been such a more gentle, kind way to do that, and to hear what he had to say and his thoughts on things, and to give him the respect that he needed.
The good thing is you can modify those
Yes.
things if you choose to.
Yes. Also after it's causing trouble. So how many of you came here today with a person in mind that you were thinking you needed to talk to? How about a topic you thought you needed to talk about? Okay. And did you find this helpful, and do you have questions now? So I think, did you have one, Howard?
Well, I came into this morning thinking that the conversation was going to be 180 degrees from what had happened. What concerns me is talking to my adult child about their decisions and what my wife and I think about what they're trying to do. I think my 48-year-old daughter doesn't recognize that we're getting older. She thinks that we have life, just working really well. She has problems. So when she says she's going on a cruise for 6 months or taking her kids to Disney World, and we think, how can she afford to do that? How can we have a conversation without her really getting angry at us for not being excited about her plans. So that's what I was hoping, and maybe that's another seminar.
Let me just repeat the question, make sure I got it. So in your mindset today, coming here, the conversations with adult children was more about how do I communicate what I might be thinking about what my adult child is doing versus the opposite.
Yeah.
You guys want to take that?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. I think the first thing, it kind of goes back to something that Erik was saying about having a common starting point. And I think a lot of us, the decisions that we've made throughout our lives are based on our priorities and our goals and our values. And it's very common to think that the people, especially people close to us, our families, have the same priorities and goals and values as we do. And so if one of my goals is to have financial security, to be able to provide for my kids, to have money going into retirement, and then it makes sense that I would think, like, of course my kids want to be financially stable. My kids might have, they may think now that it's fine to live paycheck to paycheck for the rest of their lives, and they place more value on seeing the world and having adventures and providing fun experiences for their children or whatever it is. So recognizing that our kids aren't necessarily operating using under the same kind of set of rules that we are is important to keep in mind going into that conversation. And then I always come back to asking more questions, asking more than you're telling. So starting the conversation by, I think, okay, and I'll use my daughter as an example. I have a daughter who just graduated from college, has an MBA, was ready to start a career, and decided to move to Martha's Vineyard for the summer. She wanted to spend a summer waitressing someplace beautiful before starting her career. And her plan was September she would start job hunting. September came and she had a job, she's a field hockey player, found a job coaching a team for a couple months, did that, and then decided that in January, she has a job in Aspen, she's moving out there to work at the ski resort for the winter, and then she's going back to Aspen next summer. And she has decided for her at this point in her life, she really does not care at all about kind of establishing a career and climbing any kind of ladder. Her priority is to live somewhere beautiful and make money and meet people and have exciting experiences, and to do that while she's young and can enjoy that. So in my conversations with her, I could ask, like, okay, that's fine for now, but what's your long-term plan? How long do you anticipate doing this? Like, when do you think you might settle down? Like, what's the next step? Which could make her a little bit defensive or feel like I'm being critical of her decisions. If instead I ask her, like, what is it about Martha's Vineyard that you love so much? What is it about Aspen that's really appealing to you? What is it that you're hoping to get from this? And then I can ask, do you have any like reservations about this? I know a lot of your friends, have started careers. Is there any part of you that feels pulled to doing that? Just really getting curious and asking questions that might give me a little opening when she's like, well, Jody is investing money in a 401k plan, but that's not important to me. Then that might give me a little kind of entryway to be like, I wonder if at some point in your life that would be important to you. So starting with meeting her where she is and being curious and trying to find excitement around the same things that she's excited about has been my approach in starting those conversations. I don't know if that answered your question or is helpful at all. Yeah, okay, good.
If I
Erik?
can also, I think what we're talking about here, so much of the skills, the situational awareness that we're talking about, being able to engage in a way where we could hear each other. So there's a difference between telling somebody, I'm concerned, I need you to do something, versus I'll say, I'm concerned, I'd like to talk about it. I'd like to hear, not give you my perspective, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are as well. These are all different, all of these ways that we approach the conversation and be able to ask, as Jenna suggested, being able to ask the questions and have space for the answers are all important. I think for so many of us, and again, I have this in my own life all the time, it's not that we're disagreeing with each other, that's the issue. It's how do we build that connection between where you are now and where I am now. Right? We may be in very different places. We might be starting from different places. Can we work our way to some place? It doesn't necessarily have to be in the middle. We're not talking about a straight line necessarily. It may be somewhere entirely different, but is it a dialogue? My concerns, you might not share, right? You may hear it and say, you know what, I don't prioritize those things the same way as Jenna said. Or you might think, you know what, I didn't think about that. And how can we do something about that? So all of these are different ways to start the conversation.
And there might be opportunities to kind of bring it full circle. If Anna, if your priority is traveling and seeing the world, that's awesome. That's a great thing to want to do. And I can appreciate that. And to really see the world, you know, it's handy to have some money, and maybe like having a job that pays more would afford you more opportunities to travel, kind of finding a way to kind of help people connect the dots and see that there's more than one path to the win that they're looking for.
First of all, thank you for this presentation. I think this was amazing, and I feel like it could go either way, like to your younger children. Like I have a 17-year-old as a junior that I feel I could apply a lot of this to as well. But what this is really, and I do asset and wealth management, so I help clients with their retirement planning, estate planning, transitional wealth planning, and it has made me think about a lot of things that I have not considered before in terms of, you know, because when I meet with an older couple, I'm talking to them about what they want and what their goals are. But it's also, I think, a good idea to include, and some want to talk to the children, some do not, right? And there's no wrong or right, it's what they want, I guess. But it is helpful to include the family, I think, in the long run.
That's a good way to ask the question. Who are the other people that you would want to be part of this decision making?
Yeah.
So I think we've gone a little bit over. I know you guys are here for more questions. So why don't we kind of wind things down now, and please stay, please ask your questions. Thank you guys so much. Like, this was wonderful. I'm saying a lot.
You terrified me, because now I'm thinking, oh my God, if she goes to college or graduate school and doesn't get a job, like a real job.
It's a different group of kids.
It never occurred to me. But now you all have opened my mind.
So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Erik and Jen will be here for questions if you'd like for a few minutes. I'm speaking for you. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
We have a seminar schedule on each table. Next month is probate for property owners. And then I think we've got the first 6 months of 2023 out there too, but if you're interested in any of them, they're also on our website. We'd also like to let you know about the Downsizers Club. This is a club that meets monthly, and we have moved to Zoom for the winter months. And it's for people who could be 1 to 5 years away from making any kind of decision about moving or even aging in place. But it's sort of a small support group where you can share ideas and resources with your peers and get coaching from Laura and I. And that meets monthly. So thank you again for coming. And please, open it up for questions if you have any.